Was a girl running in our group. She had a high-speed motor in a 40 Ford Coupe. She had a racing cam and a supercharged. Look out, buddy, hot rod and large. She's a hot rod. She's a hot rod.
All right, we're going to go walking around the car world now because I got a lot of things I got to tell you. And they're going to point in a certain direction. I'm not going to tell you what to think, but I want you to think about it because it's coming. VW warns of plant closures and forced layoffs in Germany in a cost-cutting drive. Now, this, I believe, is a first for VW. I mean, they've been popular over in Europe since the war. And I don't know. VW is considering plant closures and ending job security in Germany to streamline spending amid the transition to electric cars. Here we go. And I got to tell you, VW, the automaker could also implement compulsory layoffs in Germany, terminating a job security program that ruled out forced redundancies until 2029. I got to tell you, they got unions over there, and he's got to behave himself. He could really hurt himself, or not himself, the VW could. Any shutdowns would mark the first closures in Germany during the company's 87-year history, setting VW up for a clash with the powerful unions. Just what I just said. The IG Metall union promised fierce resistance to the plans. The Board of Management has today presented an irresponsible plan that shakes the foundations of Volkswagen and poses a massive threat to jobs and sites. This is IG Metall's Thorsten Groger, that sounds like a good German name, said in a statement. He said, "We will not tolerate plans that the company makes at the expense of the workforce that massively disrupt the regions in our country," Groger said. Well, you know, I got to tell you, Chuck, what comes first, the chicken or the egg? The companies are losing money because they put all their eggs in the EV basket, in the electric vehicle basket, and they went crazy, building plants, building batteries, developing new batteries. The research and development alone had to cost them billions. Well, you're an engineer. You know what that kind of stuff takes.
Well, right, and that's. Do you want to just sidetrack real quick? We'll get through this. So, we have two stories this week. One in addition to what you just read. We have one from Volvo. So this is interesting because remember the European manufacturers were the ones that were highly pressured. The EU, they had the 2030 plan, and so it was. They above everybody else were being pressured to go EV only. So now they're
having more success than we are.
Well, but here's the thing. So we have a story here that says car company Volvo has abandoned its target to produce only fully electric cars by 2030, saying that it expects to be selling some hybrid vehicles. They said they blame changing market conditions. So they were pushing in all 20. They were one of the leaders in this. They said we're going 2030. And there's no turning back.
The CEO can brag anytime he wants of any company. Can say, "Oh, we're going to do this, we're going to do that." It doesn't mean it's going to happen.
So, and then we also have a story from Ford. It says that while the company still plans to make EVs more broadly, the Ford Motor Company announced plans to shift production at Oakville, Ontario, from electric sports vehicles to gas-powered pickup trucks. So they're cutting their forecast. They said they're trimming down their forecast. They predicted they would produce 50,000 EVs by 2024, which they're not going to do. No. So they're cutting back their outlook. So that's like you said, though, there's a lot of research and development. There's a lot of costs that go into shifting production and doing all these things, turning around a production line.
Changing a plant from internal combustion to electric.
Right. And not even if you're not even making internal combustion, and now you're making them again. You go from an EV to a truck. That's a big shift for a production line.
I got a deal on that too with General Motors. They're going to build them right alongside each other.
Yeah. So I mean, so that's what we're seeing is that we talked, a while ago about this idea of this 2030 plan, 2035 plan, and now they're saying, well, put the brakes on that. The demand isn't there.
Even in California, where Gavin Newsom, the governor of the land of fruits and nuts, he's the head nut. He said, we're going to comply by 2035. You won't be able to buy anything but an electric vehicle in California. And California is the only place in the United States that just sold them like crazy. And there's a lot of them on the road in California.
Right.
But they've reached their saturation point. The people that find them useful have already bought them. The people that can't mold them to their lifestyle and what they need a car for or a vehicle for have not bought one. And they're not going to buy one. They'll go to Nevada and buy one. Buy an internal combustion. They'll go somewhere else and bring it home. But there's not going to be any gas stations pretty soon.
But so this becomes, so there's another question that comes up, and I don't know that I don't know if you touched on this yet, but this, we talk about Stellantis quite a bit. So Stellantis, they're getting ready to lay off 2,000 workers after they receive subsidies. They received $335 million to convert the Illinois plant and another $250 million to make a transmission plant in Indiana. So over $500 million in subsidies, and you have to reach certain metrics.
And they're gonna shut them down anyway.
But here becomes the question: are we going to get our $500 million back?
No.
You and I going to get a refund on our tax? How's this?
No, that's a gamble.
So you're saying
your government is gambling with our money.
Carlos Tavares is just going to make off with our money?
Well, I think he probably spent it.
Right.
Trying to keep that company afloat.
So this becomes the question. I mean, this is one of those, regardless of the, where we go moving forward after these elections, the Biden administration wrote some big checks, billions and billions of dollars for EV subsidies. Who's going to ensure that any of those people's metrics are met? And if they aren't, what's going to be the consequences?
Yeah,
are we gonna,
exactly.
We're gonna bill him $500 million?
The union's already talking about suing Stellantis if they don't open the Belvedere plant. And they're going to strike all his other plants. That'll cripple that company. It's almost, that company's almost on its deathbed now.
But this becomes a fundamental question. Okay, so the government gives them $500 million to make cars. Mm-hmm. Nobody wants their cars. They're not making cars. What happens? I mean, are you just going to sit there and, are they just going to pretend to make cars?
Where did that money? Well, Fisker did it twice.
But I'm saying, what are you just going to make a bunch of cars and park them in the parking lot and go, okay, well, we made our cars. Nobody wants them, but we made them. Yeah, well, so we filled our part of the bargain.
They say there's lots. Huge lots of Ford F-150 electrics.
We've seen them
sitting out there.
I've seen them out in Michigan. I see them all over the place.
They're everywhere.
So that becomes the question: is how you spend $500 million just on this one company. We know there was billions of subsidies to build cars that nobody wants. What's going to happen? What's going to happen to them? Are all those? They're just going to sit there until they catch fire.
Well, yeah, they're gonna.
Or they end up in a landfill, which is even worse.
Yeah, well, that's true too. What? They just too. I said it 2 years ago. Too much, too soon, too fast. It's just not right. And these guys, Stellantis is going to be the first one to go. I'll bet you money on it.
But again, what happens at $500 million? Where does that money go? Are they going to take it out? Are they going to tax him for it?
God only knows.
Where does that money go?
Did Carlos Tavares and his executive people
That's what I'm saying.
Get a nice bonus?
Get bonuses? They're going to get bonuses and then shut down and then lay everybody off? What is going to be the consequences?
I wouldn't want to be them if they did that and we gave them the money.
Well, so that, again, becomes an interesting question. Depending on who gets elected, there may be consequences, there may not be.
Yeah, it depends on how they vote.
They either may get more money or they may get in trouble. But, again, at the end of the day, this is that whole problem that I have with government playing favorites, is the government is subsidizing a product that nobody wants, and now you're not going to force me to buy it, so what are you going to do with them?
Where are you going to put them?
Where are you going to put them? Stellantis is just going to start filling fields.
Now, and what are they going to be worth 2 years after they're made?
Right.
You're going to give them away?
Don't give them away. They probably will. Everybody, free car with every student loan or something.
Is that battery, that big battery, that $20,000 battery, is that going to be any good after sitting dormant for 2 years?
Well, and that becomes, from an engineering standpoint, that becomes an inherent question. The longer a battery lays dormant, the less capacity it has.
Well,
so it sits through a couple of winters and that's it.
Exactly. Those cars that you're seeing up in Michigan sitting out in the fields,
right?
They get harsh weather up there,
right?
They can't. We already know the electric cars cannot handle the cold weather. You can't charge them. They can't. Their dependency and their range drops dramatically, And you leave them out there for a couple of years in the snow and the sleet and the
Sure.
mud and the blood and the beer, and I guarantee you,
Yeah,
they're going to be junk.
Yeah.
So what do you do with that battery? And it's full of lithium, by the way.
Right.
What are you going to do with that old lithium?
We'll
Just save it?
Then we'll give somebody $500 million to recycle all the batteries.
Well, you're going to have to.
I mean, think about the so you could
But
probably
why would you recycle them? Because nobody's buying them.
right. Well, what are you going to do with them? You let them sit there until they explode? I mean,
Well, we
that's the problem. So again, this is the problem. This is the inherent problem with government getting mixed up in
Private industry.
Private industry.
Leave it be.
Right.
Let it alone. The government should not have their fingers in the car business at all. They should have left this alone. And Chuck and I are going back and forth here about these batteries, and he made an interesting point. When you let a battery dead for that long a time,
Right.
I explained to him during the pandemic, people that had 2 cars drove one. And they put one in the garage and let it sit there. Or
Left
put
it
one
over
in
the
driveway.
winter, and then that was it, right?
It went right through the winter, and the next
Yeah.
thing you know, I sold more batteries when the pandemic was like lifted, or when the lockdown, or whatever you want to call it, when people started wanting to drive both cars again and going back to work. I sold more batteries than I ever have in the 40 years I've been there. That was the biggest glut of batteries. My interstate guy could not keep up. He usually comes once every 2 weeks. He came every other day.
Yeah.
Because I was selling batteries. I was selling 8 and 10 batteries a week.
Wow.
And they're over $200 a pop.
Right.
But yeah, and Chuck's right. You can't let your car sit like that with a dead battery.
So here becomes the question. Stellantis or whoever makes a whole bunch of cars nobody wants. They let them sit in a field. You let them sit for 6 months or a year, not tendering the battery, however you put it. And then you try to sell that car as new. Now I'm going to get a battery that has half capacity. I'm going to have to get a $20,000 battery in a year or two.
Oh, yeah, a couple of years you'll be buying a battery.
None of this is going to result in anybody benefiting.
No.
Except for Tavares.
Yeah, well, a guy like that, and Fisker. If they took the government's money. This is, again, Chuck is right. You don't let the government be involved in private business. They should not be. There's no businessmen in Washington right now.
But the problem is that all of this is based on none of this is ever based on results. All of this is based on let's write some
speculation.
Checks, let's put some people to work. It's like, well, why? There's so many things they could be doing. You could be fixing roads. You could be we need bridges rebuilt. I mean, there's so many things you could be doing in this world. Well, you're going to build cars and park them in a field somewhere?
Oh, they just keep printing money and giving it to these people. And
there's no more money to print.
Yeah, you're right. You're right. We're going to talk about that at the end of the show.
Oh, don't give me started. No, you don't have to.
No, I got to tell you about it. I got to tell you about it. I read it. I told you, I read an editorial for the first time in ages, and I usually don't like opinion pieces. This one made sense.
Okay.
So we'll talk about it. And a lot of people don't understand what inflation is and what interest rates are and how they correspond because they don't.
You're going to get us a phone call, but it's well worth it.
Well, I'm just telling you.
Say, look, we're going to do a 45-minute car show and a 15-minute education about how the government works.
About money.
And then, you can either stick around or not. You can get mad or not, whatever.
I've got 10, I'm not even going to do all these, but I got 10 stories in a row here about people backing away from the electric vehicle transition. Here, the Sunny Electric Vehicle Forecast of Car Management Briefing Seminars. It's a northern Michigan resort. Here gave way to a cloudier picture this year. No. The reality of slower electric vehicle transition in North America has settled in as automakers pull back on some of their plans in the wake of lower than expected sales. Auto executives and analysts have said. You guys have a flair for the obvious. Until the industry addresses consumer concerns on charging times, battery range, and price, EV sales are going to grow more gradually than expected, they said. And I think it's a different reason myself. I have a different reason why they're slowing down. That's my opinion, though, and I don't usually give my opinion, but I'll give it to you in a minute. General Motors President Mark Reuss said the automaker remains committed to making significant investments in EV production and retooling its internal combustion assembly plants for it. The automaker said in July that it would delay plans to build electric pickups at a plant in Michigan and would refer Buick's first electric vehicle, it will continue to invest in combustion-powered vehicles to fund the long-term EV plans. That's what they sell the cars, the bread and butter, to put it on the bread. Now that's a big execution risk, and I would say it's timed right with the supply base. We know how to do that pretty well, Royce said. Well, I don't think you do. One of the biggest problems for suppliers right now is stranded capital, and this is where we're going to talk about, Chuck. She said they've got problems, they got programs they thought were going forward, and they're not going forward. This causes significant issues for suppliers banking on higher EV parts sales to pay off large investments in new or retooled factories. So in other words, these guys that make the parts for these cars,
right?
They got all worked up and they got ready. They got everything going. They're ready to make all these electric cars. Right. They're ready to sell you all the parts you need to make that car.
And they said, never mind.
And now you don't need it.
Well, and that becomes, again, part of
And these guys are small. This is not General Motors or Ford.
Right.
This is Joe Blow's factory.
But so what happens if, so again, I retool my whatever factory to supply parts for Ford, and then they go, never mind, but I've already invested millions of dollars.
Yeah, but we're not going to make that car no more.
We're not going to make that anymore. We don't need those anymore. But what we do need is this part. Like, well, sorry, I shut down that production line.
Yeah, we shut that down.
Part.
You need an internal combustion part? I don't have any.
Yeah, well, yeah, we got rid of all those.
Yeah, you told us we were
the
going
government, everybody said we're all in. What did you say? We're all in on
Yeah.
EVs. And so we got rid of all the internal combustion.
We sure did. It's a terrible, terrible situation we're in now. And I predicted it. Chuck and I talked about this a year ago. And we were convinced this could only lead to disaster. Okay? And it did. Okay, here's another one. Here, it's no mystery why the F-150 Lightning EV isn't selling like Ford hoped. Rick and I went through this the other morning. He asked about it. And here's the deal. They cut their units in half. They're going to build more internal combustion. But what happened was they really had this truck all hyped up and they sold some. But then people found out that the price wasn't right. They were supposed to start at $41,000. Well, guess what? By the time they got them off the assembly line and they were on sale in May 22, that price was a mirage. The truck started at $52,000 when it went on sale and snagged our 2023 truck of the Motor Trend Truck of the Year. But they just kept raising the prices on it.
I mean, those things fully loaded were approaching six figures.
Well, no, these are the base prices.
No, I'm saying the base price, but I'm saying once you add all the features. I have a side story here. Ford is going to start, you know how they have the keypads? I've never really used mine. I don't know if yours has one or not. The keypad on the side. Yeah. Nobody ever used them. They start charging an extra $500 for this keypad if you want it, which again, I've never used it. But so, I mean, again, nickel and diming you. And you paid, $100,000 for a truck.
Well,
oh, by the way, for $500 extra, you get a keypad.
If you're fighting a dead battery, that keypad's no good anyway.
Right. Well, it's good if you ever lock your keys in the car.
Well, yeah.
I call my wife. Hey, remember that code? And I got my keys in the car. I think I used that one time.
I carry that in my wallet.
Yeah, well, there you go. Then your wallet's locked in there with your keys.
I know.
But you got to give it to your wife. You call her and go, hey, what's my code?